panelists I see. Enjoy.
Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to everybody to SecurityWomen's event, which is called A Key to Peace, More Women in Peacekeeping. I am Juliet Coleman, the Director of SecurityWomen, and today is the International Day of Peace. We seem so very far away from this in the world as it is at the moment. But we believe at SecurityWomen that gender equality is key to having a more peaceful world. We focus on gender equality in the security and defence sector, that is policing, armed forces, private security, cybersecurity, and most importantly, peacekeeping. We seek a feminist and a human rights approach to security and defence. And patriarchy is at the root of many issues. It is hoped that the Summit of the Future will recognise this, and member states will commit to ensure equal rights for men and women. There is an event which is on later on today at the UN, which is entitled Dismantling the Patriarchy. And you can actually access it, if you're not in New York, you can access it via the UN TV. And I think it's important that I just reiterate why women are important in peacekeeping. So, 1 or 2 points. First of all, access and communication. So, female peacekeepers have access to gender-segregated areas, and therefore they're able to offer better support and security. And let's face it, women actually understand. They have a lived experience of being a woman and are likely to show more empathy. Also, mission diversity builds a wider range of skills and perspectives and different approaches. It's also the opportunity to gather high-quality intelligence and information. And it's an opportunity to change men's attitudes. So we want to break down those stereotypical masculine warrior qualities, that is, valuing physical strength, use of force, command and control, and balancing that with the softer skills that are needed. Also, women peacekeepers act as role models for young women in the communities in which they're serving. And it helps them, maybe, with their career choices. Also, let's face it, women enable more sustainable peace negotiations, where there's an understanding of women's perspectives on the ground so that peace negotiations and peace agreements can last longer. There's also less abuse. Sexual exploitation and abuse goes down when there are female peacekeepers. But let's face it, that is all that's needed. We need better training and also a zero tolerance approach. And last but not least, I think it improves the reputation of the UN and peacekeeping generally. And it provides more positive engagement with communities and builds that very vital element, which is trust. I'd just like to thank our supporting organisations for this event. The permanent mission of the Republic of Zambia to the UN has supported this event, and I do hope that the military advisor will be with us shortly. Also, UN Women, the Peace and Security section, UNODC in Southern Africa, that is the Drug and Crime Agency, the World Future Council, NAWO, the National Alliance of Women's Organisations, and the UK Civil Society Women's Alliance, and also the G100 Security and Defence Wing. Thank you all very much indeed. And I just wanted to know, very good. We have the military advisor from Zambia, Brigadier General Oliver Musonda. I would like you to take the floor now and say a few words. Brigadier General, are you with us? There you are. Thank you. Welcome. Brigadier General, would you like to say a few words before we start the panel event?
Thank you very much for actually inviting me to this important meeting.
I'm sorry, but we can't actually hear you.
Can you hear me? Are you able to get me?
Now we can hear you.
You can hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. Like I said, I'm very delighted to be part of this discussion. And it's a very important topic for us as Zambia, because we've been involved in so many activities as far as the participation of women in peacekeeping operations is concerned. And I would like to mention that as Zambia, we are one of the highest member states who have contributed highly to the women participation in the United Nations. I think at the moment we stand at 27%, which is the highest, seconded by Ghana, who are about 17% in terms of women involvement in the peacekeeping. And this is actually very cardinal for us, because we wanted to involve everyone, to give an opportunity to our female women in uniform, so that they can also have a feel and contribute effectively to the peacekeeping operations that are going on world over. Zambia has been participating in a number of peacekeeping operations ranging from Rwanda, Mozambique, Angola. At the moment, we are in Central African Republic, where we've got a battalion. And we are also, I would also want to mention that we are the brainchild of the female engagement team. It all started by the Zambian battalion in Central African Republic somewhere about 2014. So with that in mind, our idea was to expose our women to these operations, and also to give them an opportunity to contribute to the peacekeeping. As you know, mothers are known to be, peace givers even in a home. If you look at in a home, mothers are the ones that are known to, give like shelter, make a home what it is. So in this case, like in Central African Republic, our women were involved in sharing knowledge with the female folks in that country. You know very well that Central African Republic is a Muslim-dominated community, and it's very hard for male folks to start interacting. So we took that initiative as a Zambian to ensure that we access, information, the female folks, and also teach them, domestic duties of a woman, an African woman, and also there's also a way of getting information. Directly, but through such initiatives, we're able to interact with them, we're able to get a part of it, and we're able to help them develop themselves. Teaching them gardening, teaching them skills like sewing and knitting, so that they can also have a life of their own, after the war or later on in their life. So as Zambia, we are actually very practical, and I would also want to commend the Elsie. I was just in Zambia, I think 2 weeks ago. I went to Zambia with Deborah, where Elsie is also giving more opportunity to our female police officers to participate by supporting them with infrastructure development. Because whenever our women were going to seek for examination, there are challenges of accommodation. So Elsie initially actually came on board to give support in that venture, and also giving support in terms of equipment, training equipment. They donated some computers, fax machines, printers, which actually will go a long way in ensuring that we have more women, given opportunities to sit for exams and pass and be deployed in the United Nations, peacekeeping, whatever it could be. So basically, those are the few areas where, as a country, we are forging ahead so that we can, expose our women, give them an opportunity as the men, because what a man can do, a woman can do. That is what we are at the moment.
Thank you very much, Brigadier General. We much appreciate your support for women peacekeepers. Thank you very much for your words. I would now like to pass to Laura-Jane, who will moderate the panel. Thank you, Laura-Jane.
Thank you very much, Juliet. I'd like to reiterate Juliet's welcome to everyone. I am with SecurityWomen, and I would like to just cover very briefly the housekeeping rules. I just wanted to remind everyone that they should keep their speakers on mute while the speaker is speaking. And then just to run you through our agenda, we have three phenomenal experts with us today who will be presenting. We will have a Q&A session at the end, as well as a general discussion. And we would like to welcome our participants to share their questions, which they may have in our chat, in the chat box. And if you could just drop your questions there, we will field those questions at the end of the presentations. And then also please do feel free to raise your hand should you wish to ask your question over the speaker. Okay, well, thank you very much. And then just a few words to really bring this to position our talk today in light of the Action Days and the Summit of the Future. Women's participation in peacekeeping and conflict prevention has been a central element of the Women, Peace and Security agenda since the adoption of the UNODC 1325. So that was nearly 25 years ago. And today, roughly over 600 million women and girls live in conflict-affected countries, and peace operations face increasing new and complex global threats. So as we approach the concretization of the Pact for the Future, which will be endorsed by member states, this side event really positions gender at the forefront of recent developments and emphasizes the intrinsic relationship between SDG 5, which is gender equality, and SDG 16, our peace, justice, and strong institutions. So we convene today to hear from our global experts on why gender equality in peace and security is not only essential for sustainable peace, but also for the advancement of global security. So on to our, I'd like to welcome our first speaker, Deborah Warren-Smith. Deborah is the current manager of the Elsie Initiative Fund for Uniformed Women in Peace Operations, a UN trust fund hosted by UN Women since October 2019. During this time, Deborah has led the fund in supporting over 20 projects from 8 troop and peace contributing countries and 2 United Nations peacekeeping missions. Deborah served in the Australian Army for 30 years, retiring in 2021 as a lieutenant colonel. Deborah has led an extensive military career, having been deployed on several operational tours, including to East Timor with the International Force East Timor, as well as the multinational Australian-led intervention and the United Nations Transitional Administration East Timor. And Deborah has also been deployed to Afghanistan with NATO's International Security Assistance Force in 2009. And so we really do welcome Deborah's extensive experience. Over to you, Deborah. Thank you so much.
Deborah. Deb, can I interrupt you? You're on mute.
Thank you very much for that. My humble apologies. Even though we've been using Zoom for 5 years, we can still make those basic mistakes. So thank you very much for the kind introduction, and to Brigadier General Oliver Masonda, it's lovely to see you online, and also thank the Permanent Mission of the Republic of Zambia for your support today. Yes, I manage the Elsie Initiative Fund for Uniformed Women in Peace Operations, and we are a United Nations multi-partner trust fund. So as was said in the introduction, the fund was established in 2019, and the Elsie Initiative Fund is one of the pillars or components of a broader initiative called Canada's Elsie Initiative. And that broader initiative has been designed to address gender inequality in United Nations peace operations and to increase women's full, equal, and meaningful participation in peace operations to ultimately better prepare missions to deliver on their mandates and support sustainable peace globally. So I will take a few minutes to walk you through some key points about the fund and our work, and I will be very happy to take questions about the fund later in the discussion. So during my short introduction, I'll explain why we were created, the impact that the fund seeks to achieve, who is eligible to apply for funding, the types of funding that we offer, and also when our funding windows are open. I'll also be very happy to highlight some of the key results we have achieved during the chat. So let's start with the why. The thinking behind establishing the fund was rooted in the belief that a lack of funding should not limit or be a barrier in itself for security institutions to advance gender equality within that institution. So at that time, this is back in 2019, this was against a backdrop of a glacial or very slow progress in increasing the numbers of uniformed women who deploy to peace operations. This was also despite a further resolution 2242, which was released in 2015, which called for the doubling of the number of women who are deployed in military and police roles within peacekeeping operations by 2020. So the fund was created with the support of member states, Canada, and UN peacekeeping experts, and it is fully aligned with the United Nations Secretary General's Uniform Gender Parity Strategy, or the UGPS, which was released in 2018, and it is in place for 10 years. We are also fully in line with the Secretary General's Action for Peacekeeping and Action for Peacekeeping Plus. The fund provides financial grants and premiums designed to support and incentivize troop and police contributing countries and United Nations organizations in their efforts to increase the meaningful participation of women in peace operations. And that then in turn supports national commitments to gender equality within national frameworks. Moving on to the what. So this is the impact that the fund seeks to achieve. Our ultimate impact is that we contribute to accelerating the pace of change, so speeding up and ramping up the numbers of women who are deployed to peacekeeping operations. You can also see our secondary impact, and this is also very important in terms of the knowledge that we gain by the fund and the knowledge that we gain from lessons and good practices from countries that we support really contribute to the global conversation. So we're sharing lessons and impact. And every project proposal that we support, whether it's with a UN organization or with a TPCC, must clearly demonstrate how that project and the activities will contribute to at least one or more of the outcomes that you can see on the screen. So moving on, and I've just addressed this briefly, who can apply to the fund? We can make a grant to either a national government and through them to their armed forces or police or gendarmerie, or we can also make a grant directly to a United Nations organization, and they can partner with a national government. United Nations missions and also agencies, funds, and programs can also apply directly to the fund. However, civil society organisations, whilst they cannot apply directly to the fund, they can certainly work and act as an implementing partner with a national government or a participating United Nations organisations. And we have seen successful examples of this, such as with Senegal Gendarmerie, who have partnered with an organisation, a CSO called FemWise-Africa Solidarité. Also, the Kofi Annan Institute for Conflict Transformation has served as the independent research institution working with the armed forces of Liberia to partner with them to conduct a barrier assessment. We have also seen the University of Sierra Leone work similarly with the military and police in Sierra Leone. And moving to Latin America, we have seen the Latin American Security and Defense Network called RESDAL, and also the Universidad de las Americas work with Mexico Armed Forces. And so the fund concretely encourages partnerships with civil society organisations. And the reason for this is that they bring valuable experience working in the women, peace and security area, as well as gender and peace building. And what they also bring is a national and regional perspective to the countries and institutions that we are working with. And when we look at national governments, as you can see on the slide there, they need to be either a current contributing troop and police contributing country, or they need to demonstrate serious intention to become one, and with a high-level commitment. We also need to ensure that, that these countries remain eligible for support after they have supported the Elsie Fund to conduct a human rights due diligence policy and also a financial assessment of their capacity to be able to manage the project. So moving on to the types of funding that we can provide. We provide funding for countries to do a barrier assessment, and we will fund that barrier assessment. And then based on the results of that barrier assessment, we can then support a country to undergo, through a grant, to undertake specific project activities aimed at increasing women's participation. And again, this is based on the outcomes and the evidence-based recommendations from a barrier assessment report. And as I've previously mentioned, UN organisations can also apply for funding that will address one or more of the EIF outcomes. We also can provide a gender strong unit premium. And this is an innovative premium that is paid to a troop and police contributing country only, so not to a UN organisation, after the conclusion of a unit's deployment and that they have fully met our gender strong unit criteria. And that gender strong unit premium is an Elsie Initiative Fund specific premium. And I'm very happy to provide more details about the barrier assessment methodology as we get into discussions today. However, for now, it is very much worth noting that one of the compelling aspects of the MOEP methodology is that it gathers factual data directly from the institution. It involves interviews with key decision makers within that institution, so individuals who have authority at the national level, and obviously decision makers related to peacekeeping. And lastly, and very importantly, is that the barrier assessment includes a large-scale survey of both women and men within the security forces. And what this does is it ensures a comprehensive understanding of barriers to women and also men within that security institution context and also within the national context. So last, before I finish, let me just highlight that we have a website. We have a number of resources and information on our website. There are a number of, on our resources page, we have access to all of the barrier assessments that have been conducted with globally, both supported by the Elsie Fund, as well as supported through funding directly from Canada and Norway, and also 3 countries that have undergone a barrier assessment using their own funds. So you can jump onto the resources page here to find MOIP resources, and you can also jump on to our programming round to find resources to support applications to the fund in our 4th programming round, which we are aiming to open up a 4th programming round in the 1st quarter next year. So let me now hand back to Laura-Jane. Thank you very much, and very happy to talk more about barriers as we get into the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deborah. That was very informative, and I will introduce, moving on to our next speaker, introducing Dr. Linda Naidoo. Dr. Linda Naidoo is a gender-based violence, child protection and gender specialist employed at the United Nations UNODC Regional Office for Southern Africa. Dr. Linda Naidoo coordinates the gender-based violence portfolio for the SADC region. She is currently fulfilling the following portfolios: the focal point for gender, disability, and focal point for protection against sexual exploitation and abuse, and human rights. She is a finalist for the DO Global Gender Award and is a member of global UN gender groups and the ISAC reference group for gender in humanitarian action. Dr. Naidoo has a wealth of experience in the UNODC area, as well as carries many academic qualifications, which I will leave all of you to follow up with on our SecurityWomen webpage, where Dr. Naidoo's biography can be found. I'll be handing over then to Dr. Naidoo. Thank you so much for being here, and we look forward to your presentation. Sorry, Dr. Naidoo, you are currently on mute.
So sorry about that. Yeah, no, thank you for that introduction. I'm now going to share. So a very good afternoon, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panelists. Today, I'm honored to present to you a topic of paramount importance, the inclusion of women in peacekeeping missions, which is really a strategic imperative that enhances the effectiveness and sustainability of peace operations. In my presentation today, I'm just going to emphasize some considerations to enhance the role of women in peacekeeping missions. So in having said that, we need to take cognizance of the fact that, you know, half of the world's population cannot be left out. They cannot be removed in looking at how we can consider holistic peace. And building lasting peace and security requires the participation of women. So simply put, women have the right to be part of a process just as much as men do. In looking at UNODC's strategic mission and vision, it emphasizes the issues of gender equality and gender empowerment, and it supports the security, peace, and human rights and development agenda. Globally, UNODC looks at how it can align itself with partners in different contexts, regional, member states, as well as global partners to prioritize, to realize this particular vision and mission that we have presented. The United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, the executive director highlights the importance in all his speeches on the inclusion of women and how important their voices are to be in order to integrate them and consider their diverse roles. Importantly, UNODC looks at how we can strengthen the capacity of women and look at how we can mainstream gender in all our initiatives, but also in particular around criminal justice. And peaceful societies can only be built with women included in alignment with the resolution 1325 and its related resolutions. However, I'd like to pose a question. Has the impact of resolution 1325 been adequate? Have we really done enough to reach this particular resolution? So in having said that, I'd like to provide some considerations of how we can do better. We need to increase women's participation, and we can do that by deploying gender-balanced peacekeeping units at all levels. But in doing this, we should not be looking at numbers, how we can include women and escalate those numbers to improve parity. We need to look at the aspects of gender equality, the rights of women and equal opportunities to allow them to serve in all areas. And when we look at the pre-deployment course, it should be targeting both males and females and including the issues of gender sensitivity, but importantly, respecting populations, all populations, including women, without discrimination. And that also requires a think-through on the cultural diversity of and cultural sensitivities of a community in which they are serving. In terms of sexual exploitation and abuse as well, we know this has been a major level of concern to the SG because women suffer disproportionately during conflict and its aftermath. And it's generally an experience of underreporting in relation to CR. Also, we need to look at a balancing of role allocation. Women in peacekeeping missions are expected to perform a range of diverse roles, which can be equivalent to double role dipping, and can be quite challenging for them. And also this becomes quite a challenge as well because sometimes we reinforce stereotypes to increase the gendered dimensions of labor segregation. So instead of looking at what we want to achieve in making sure that women reach all levels and counterparts of diverse roles, we actually stereotypically engage them in particular roles, such as reducing them to administrators. In addition, women need to provide inputs to gender-sensitive policies that are linked to peace processes and operations. Also, we need to engage how we can support access to justice and addressing the rights of survivors, to address impunity. such as in gender-based violence, addressing in particular SIA and sexual violence. In all of this, we need to look at how we strengthen the roles of women in leadership so that they're empowered to be able to provide feedback, and we can look at how we can get them to provide decision-making in higher levels of reform. And in measuring women in peacekeeping missions, we should not be measuring in terms of quantitative data and the impact by measuring statistics, but we should really look at how we can qualitatively measure the impact of women in peacekeeping by determining their operational effectiveness and how effective they have been in communities, in communication, reporting, in their outreach with regards to internally displaced populations and refugees and other vulnerable populations. And importantly as well, like Deborah mentioned, it's important to be able to assess the barriers that face women in peacekeeping missions that ultimately impact gender equality. So in strengthening the leadership, we need to be able to look at how they can be strengthened in economic development, organization of camps, and providing positive role modeling in communities, looking at how they can ultimately communicate community needs to be able to be best served. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Naidoo. That was very informative, and I do feel that, as you've rightly pointed out, that there are key overlaps, particularly in terms of evaluating data, which both yourself and Deborah have highlighted. And we now turn to Ms. Dlamini, who is also currently based in South Africa. Ms. Dlamini is both an international relations and mediation practitioner who has worked extensively in promoting peace and security, in advancing the women, peace and security agenda. Ms. Dlamini is a member of the African Union FemWise-Africa network of African women mediators in conflict prevention and mediation since 2018. She is also a member of the Kothreda Shope Women Mediators Forum in South Africa. She serves on the board of the Southern African Liaison Office, SALO, which organizes dialogues focusing on countries affected by conflict, largely in Southern Africa. Ms. Dlamini carries a wealth of conflict resolution and mediation experience, and I'd like to hand over to her to present to us.
Thank you very much, Laura-Jane. I'd like to greet everyone, greet yourself, greet the fellow panelists, greet the leadership of SecurityWomen, Juliet, fellow panelists, Deborah, Linda, Brigadier Oliver, the SALO director, John Brickhill, and the participants that are here. I won't say much because we will engage some more and we need to leave more time for engagements. But I would like to start by saying something that I've been saying in the past few months, that when it comes to Resolution 1325, we have focused more on protection and, or rather on participation, and there are other pillars: prevention, protection, relief and recovery. And we have spoken more about participation, which is very important. But we have said, in my view, we have not really spent time talking about protection, prevention, relief and recovery. as the other pillars of Resolution 1325. And I think we need to speak more about those, especially when it comes to peace and support operations of the UN or of other missions of regions in different continents. And as we talk about the involvement of women in peace support operations, the increase to have more women in peacekeeping forces, I would also like us to, to say, let's also talk about all the other components, the women in the military, plus women in the police force, plus women in the civil component of peace support operations. And what is also key is that this recruitment should not only start, or we should not only talk about this recruitment when it comes to peace support operations, but it must start at national level. And therefore, we should influence the policies of our countries domestically, and ensure that this is reflected in the national plans that seek to implement Resolution 1325. And also, as we speak about prevention in peace support operations, we are told, or rather research tells us, that women are very key when it comes to early warning systems. So therefore, Program Director, I think it's very key that as we increase women participation in peace support operations, we should also strengthen that element of prevention by ensuring that the women in peace support operations are also able to relate to women in local communities in the area of early warning system or early warning mechanisms. So early warning mechanisms should not only be limited to regional institutions. In the case of Africa, like the African Union or the sub-regional components of the African Union. As we move, moderator and colleagues, I would also like to say it's important for us not to look at the increase of women only in numbers, but we also need a gendered approach, because it's something else to have more women, but it's also something else to have a gendered approach. So we don't only want numbers, but we also want to see even men being able to use a gendered approach in peace support operations. Therefore, even training should not only be limited to women, but the training should be across genders. And we have heard that there are challenges when it comes to entry, the requirements that are expected in certain countries. And those are some of the things that we would also need to look at. What are the barriers, for women to be enlisted in peace support operations, so that they can also participate. And lastly, moderator, I'd like us to say induction is paramount, and induction is paramount before those that are deployed, and also on arrival. Yeah, because sometimes we might take it for granted that everybody understands a gendered approach, but collective induction would be key. I just want to read some stats for us. These are old stats, but I think it's just important for us to note. The data of January 2021 showed that in peacekeeping operations, women are fewer than 5% of all military personnel, and 11% of personnel in formed police units, and 28% of individual police officers. And this report also says that against this backdrop of slow progress, the United Nations Department of Peace Operations, DPO, in short, put forward its uniformed gender parity strategy in 2018, setting targets for the next decade, which is by 2028, women should constitute 15% of deployed contingent troops, 30% of individual police officers, and 20% of formed police units. I think it's very clear that these numbers are still very low, actually, and therefore but it's a step in the right direction, and I think we should continuously monitor whether this strategy is really reaching its targets, and because we might just come back in 2028, 2028 and realize that not much has happened. So it would be very important to continuously collect data, disaggregated data in this regard. Thank you, moderator, and thank you to those who are here for listening as we deliberate about this very, very important subject. And as I conclude, I just want to say, as we move forward, perhaps we also need to say, what is it that we can do differently? We've been advocating for these things for quite some time, and should we postpone the protection of women, the assault of women in the Eastern DRC that continues, sexual assault, should we, is it enough to advocate, in the comforts of our spaces when, as we speak, as we are talking in this forum right now, a woman is attacked in a conflict zone, and should there be an element in peace support operations where women are taught self-defense, perhaps, protection, can we deliberate about protection and prevention, and say protection by who, for who, prevention by who, for who? Shouldn't we be talking about people being able to protect themselves so that people are not only so that we don't patronize the ones that we really seek to assist by empowering them to protect themselves and to prevent conflicts themselves. So for me, I think we really need to reflect. And thank you.
Thank you very much, Molly, and to the rest of our speakers. I'm just going to mention, in the spirit of timekeeping, I'm going to open up our panel discussion now, where I will pose a few questions to our panelists. However, please do keep posting in our chat box. We have until 15:15, so I will also then be directing or taking and fielding a few questions from the audience. I see, Ruth, you do have your hand up already, and we have some questions in the chat box. And then I'll get us started off with a few questions from our side, which the panelists can answer. I'd like to really draw this correlation and the highlighting of, first of all, the data, the importance and emphasis surrounding the use of data, and the use not only, as Dr. Naidoo has pointed out, of quantitative data, but also of the qualitative. And one overarching question that really comes to mind is, beyond the solutions which we have, which each panelist has discussed, what can be what more can be done to introduce a greater number of women in peacekeeping, but particularly, do we need an emphasis on more data? Do we need more data to really drive home the importance of the benefits which women make towards peacekeeping? So that's just the first question for any one of the panelists who would like to perhaps tackle that one. I see, Deborah, you have had your hand up, so over to you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the impressions and points that Molly raised. So that Molly raised, and I absolutely agree with all of those. When we come to data, yes, of course, it is about much more than the numbers, and that is where we talk about the full, equal, and meaningful participation. I guess you have to count and use gender disaggregated data to understand where you've come from and the change. So the change that you're trying to make and understand. So yes, collection of data is very, very important, but that is just the start. There's a number of other things that we can also do to support women's full, equal, and meaningful participation. And there is one that I would just like to flag, and that is when we talk about we need to have an enabling environment. So one of the things that we can do in that enabling environment is to actually aim to remove barriers through gender-sensitive policies. And I'd just like to flag a couple of examples here, and this is based on work that the Elsie Initiative Fund is either doing or supporting. So I'd like to raise one example, and that is the Zambia Police Service have recently released a workplace gender policy. So this is work that was actually supported in a bilateral activity directly through Canadian funding, but working with the Zambia Police Service. So their workplace policy is it's 2022 to 2026, and it is really looking at how to promote gender equality and end discrimination within the police force. What it is doing is looking to integrate a gender-sensitive policy based on consultations with men and women. So this is engaging both men and women, understanding what are the particular issues that they face, and also across all ranks. So they have been engaged and they are working to really make the security institution an environment that supports women's recruitment, retention, and advancement. So this is coming back to that national level that one of the other panelists raised. Senegal Gendarmerie are doing something similar, and this is with direct funding support from the Elsie Initiative Fund. And they have developed a national strategy for gender equity and equality within their organisation. And Senegal Gendarmerie policy, it's a framework that then guides actions within Senegal Gendarmerie. And there is, again, a strong commitment to promoting gender equality within that organisation. There is also a strong commitment to deploying increased numbers. This is where I come to numbers. But how do we then move beyond those numbers when we're talking about having women in leadership positions? There's a number of other actions that I could also talk about, but let me stop there and open it up for the other panel participants to talk about going beyond numbers and how do we do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Deborah. Would either Dr. Naidoo or Molly, would you like to take that question?
Maybe I can just add, Laura-Jane. I think it's very important. Like I've mentioned, the quality issues. And, you know, there's a great deal of uncertainty about how legitimate and supportive, you know, peacekeeping processes are. And when we say that women need to be placed more prominently, we agree, and we believe it actually does have sustainability for communities. But I think it's really critical that we really consider the voices of the communities that we serve. And I think that's very important, to be able to get their input, to be able to also empower them. And in doing so as well, I think it's really important to be able to, you know, communities also need to understand that, because it's a legacy of male dominance and authority in peacekeeping, that women as well can provide those positive role models. But in doing that, as we are doing it, we need to be able to look at, from communities that we serve, is it enough? Is it really enough? Because when we look at the, you know, the impact, the negative impact of gender-based violence and sexual violence in particular, you know, we find the reporting is really, really, really huge. You know, and a great deal of concern is actually has been raised around this issue. So we need to be able to look at women peacekeeping. How much are we doing to actually escalate and address the underreporting? Are we really providing that support to the communities? And really to hear from communities, how can we improve that? And then also to hear more from women who are also peacekeepers. What can we do as more to support them? Because you know, sometimes we look at the pre-deployment training, as I mentioned, but I think the leadership aspect is predominantly missed. And I think that really needs more consideration, and it needs to be more nuanced. Thank you.
And over to Molly, if you would like to add, and if not, we can then move on to our audience.
We can move, thank you. I think colleagues have covered.
Thank you very much. Then I'd like to open up the floor to the audience, starting with Ruth, who has her hand raised.
Thank you very much, Laura, Juliet, Colonel Oliver Musonda, as well as every other panelist, Ms. Molly. My name is Ruth Kangwa, and I'm a human rights lawyer from Zambia, but as well as a young person that advocates for peace under the African Union's Youth, Peace and Security Network of Southern Africa. This has been a very interesting conversation. Typically, one would have thought women in peacekeeping. I don't think I can add on to this conversation, but it's touched on many other conversations we've been having in the past few weeks. So recently, during the pre-Tana forum that was held here in Lusaka, I was actually speaking to something Ms. Molly touched on, as well as Linda, with regards gender disaggregated data. And I think what my intervention will be is, I broke it down to state that what is very critical now, if we're just looking at the implementation of UN Resolution 1325, in terms of monitoring and evaluating its effectiveness, what is very critical before participation, which I strongly advocate for, especially for young women in the peace and security sector, is that collecting data is going to be critical, because this information will help in designing, you know, many interventions that can address the specific needs of women, especially in conflict-affected areas, but also to highlight what Ms. Linda had brought in, and also Ms. Molly. Sometimes it's also not the people that are at the women rather, at the forefront of the war zone, but even those in a society like Zambia, where we say it's a very peaceful nation, and to commend also the examples that were highlighted about how we've got the Zambia Police Security initiative in that workspace. I then added on to say that while we do have such brilliant initiatives and we're able to use what's happening in Liberia, for example, where they've got, their national action plans, can we go a step further and be deliberate? Of course, when we're partnering with local community organizations or social movements like one that I run, but also with the national government, how can we ensure that we create a form of strong commitment as well as political will from African leaders to ensure that whilst we are trying to collect data, information is a bit, or is rather made available? Because what we picked out in the context of our region or the SADC region, I think this is one of the most securitarized kind of region. And when it comes to peacekeeping or women in peace and security, the information is less. So that is also a starting point where we can look at how do we work or coordinate with the government? How do we cooperate with different actors in monitoring and evaluation? And this will then help the challenge of underreporting of the gender issues. If we were to dive a bit deeper, so that I allow other people to speak, is that I believe local women organizations are currently doing work at the grassroots. But with the empowered, or rather the data collection efforts that they've already made, how do we best position to gather sensitive information while ensuring the safety and the dignity of respondents, even the women at the forefront of peacekeeping? I do believe that they don't come back to per se, come out in the open to share what's happening. But how do we create a safe space where we can collect some of this data? And lastly, my last point, to answer any of the few questions, is also what may help.
Ruth.
Oh, sorry, Laura.
I'm
Okay,
so sorry, Ruth.
Yeah,
I really don't want to interrupt you. But if it's possible, perhaps to put that second point in the chat. We do have
sure.
only about 10 to 15 minutes left. Thank you very much for that contribution. Would you like to direct that to a particular panelist, or can we open that question now?
I think we can actually just open it up, but it would also be helpful from the Elsie Fund Initiative.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm going to take one more question from the audience, and then we can open both of those questions up to the panelists. Alam Akram, you have your hand up. Would you like to go ahead with your question?
Unmuting. Well, thank you all for your participations and for your comments. But it saddens me as a woman who are talking about peacekeeping, and especially the UN representatives. It took them about 75 years to recognize and to realize that they have done nothing of peacekeeping between Israel and Palestine, especially after the occupation. It saddens me that everybody is trying to forget about what is happening for women and children right away now in the area, and yet Israel is not doing anything. Yes, I hear the voices of some of Jewish diaspora supporting peace and end of occupation, but I don't see proper action. Miss Linda Naidoo, she mentioned that it took them, that they are going to address impunity. There are impunity everywhere. In each country, there has been some impunity, including Israel now, where everybody is shying away to say the truth that enough is enough. Israel is no more than another state, has to go by UN resolution, which created Israel on the account of misery of Palestinians, as well as the situation now, the 75 right from the beginning, but after occupation, how many? I am a woman, a privileged woman of British nationality of Palestinian origin, and I have always been an advocate and supporting peace with international resolution, the two-state solution. Everybody in the world now is watching Israel throwing away everything, because they got used to impunity. 75 years, how long is it going to take them to address this now? Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much for that
Thank
question.
you.
So I take it then your question is regarding how do we address impunity? I'd like to then just take our questions back to the panelists and a reminder that we have about 5 minutes to answer in response, 5 to 7 minutes for this.
So Laura-Jane, I think I'm going to very briefly make a comment with regards to the question that was raised by Ms. Karam. Just to say that the UN recognizes impunity on different levels in terms of different crises, and the UN has actually looked at how they can address this more strategically, and that is why I have mentioned it's one of the considerations that we need to address. In relation to the Israel-Palestine conflict, unfortunately, I'm not in a position to be able to address that because I'm not on that particular level of looking at what has been done in relation to the SG's decisions. So, but yeah, just to say that the UN is actually considering the issues of impunity.
Molly and Deborah, if you would like to weigh in or add to that. If not, I can just highlight some of the questions that have come out of the chat. Thank you.
Okay. I don't know, Laura, do you want to read the other questions so that we respond maybe to all of them?
Yes, of course. I have just a comment, really, is from Kurt Eyre, if I pronounce that correctly. A couple of instinctive reflections listening to the excellent points made thus far. I do believe the word enablement is key, Deb's point, and perhaps should replace participation, which then has me thinking that strategically is now not the time to reappraise the original focus of 1325, which is a reorder and reshaping participation, protection, prevention, relief, and recovery, to be more closely aligned to domestic priorities that integrates more focus on the security sector, education, international affairs, justice, trust, governance, and accountability. The Zambian example given was a shift domestically, and I still think we tend to be far too externally orientated when in fact we need to get our own domestic house in order. So that was just a comment, really. I think that if we can perhaps have a consolidation of final thoughts or any responses to any of the questions, and then we can close off with some final remarks, just to hand that over then to the rest of the panelists. Thank you.
So let me jump in there on that last reflection in terms of perhaps do we need to refocus, domestically, nationally, regionally. And obviously I'm speaking from my experience with the Elsie Fund, working with a number of countries that we're supporting, but in fact that is that the fund actually works with troop and police contributing countries to really look at their own context. So within the security institution itself, and then within that national context. So I agree with that. And there's a number of other things that countries can be doing within their own national context, especially when we then shift to talk about peacekeeping. And I can just run off, there's a laundry list of those that countries can be doing. But what I would like to say here is that as one of the other speakers, and I'm sorry, I forgot who it was, but we're sitting here in the comfort of our own homes. talking about this, but what the Elsie Fund is doing is we are providing fundings for countries to concretely make these changes. We strongly, we want countries to have ownership of their projects, their activities, and some of these are quite simple, but they are looking at providing, for example, gender-specific security training for men and women. We are supporting programs to mentor women within these security institutions to then be able to take up leadership positions and have a career within their security institution. We are supporting countries to really address sexual exploitation and abuse by concrete policies. So there's a number of things that can be done domestically, nationally, and internally. So I absolutely support that comment. And thank you everyone for your reflections as well. Yeah, over.
Okay, I can come in, Laura. Yeah, and just thank, the colleagues, the other panelists, about the good work, that you're doing, Deborah, Linda, and in addition to what the colleagues have said, and in response, to maybe one or two questions, just want to make an example about some history. I come from South Africa. On the 9th of August in 1956, there was a big march by women. And as you know, during the apartheid era, the Black people were oppressed. But this march was constituted by all women of all races, Indian women, colored women, white women, Black women. They came together, they marched to the union buildings, which was the office of the Prime Minister's trade home at the time, and 20,000 of them. And well, the Black women then, of course, they would have been shot perhaps, but because they were protected by other women, white women, so obviously the police would not shoot. And then, but the Black women are also carrying in their bags white babies, because they were nannies. And I'm sharing this story because I think as women we need to go beyond the politics when it comes to protection and prevention. Our countries might have certain standpoints, and my wish is that we just go beyond that, beyond our country positions on certain conflicts, certain international conflicts, and unite as women, just to talk about the protection of women and children, and boy child, the girl child, and unite at that level, and explain to our counterparts in our countries where we might have difficulty about positions, because those that we might worry about, they probably would understand, and maybe it's time we do that, because there are certain conflicts where we might not be too keen to engage on, because it involves a lot of politics, but those are the conflicts that we really have to talk about. Someone spoke about Palestine. We have, we also have a case in the occupied areas in Western Sahara, for example, where the mission of the UN does not have a human rights mandate. And I think those are some of the things we can advocate for as civil society, and well, just to push, continuously push, for the protection of women in those conflicts. Yeah, and yeah, so I'd like to stop there. I think we no longer have much time, but thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mali. Any short final remarks, Linda?
No, thank you for that, Laura-Jane. Just to say that, in terms of the inclusion of women in peacekeeping, it's definitely a key to making sure that we have lasting peace and security. I mean, they have a unique contribution to look at how they can really strengthen effective peace operations and the security of women. But I think it's very important for us to be able to take cognizance of their conditions as well. It needs to be conducive to be able to encourage their recruitment and their retention, and also the conditions for them as well, and looking at how we can make them more empowered. But having said that as well, I also want to also look at, in some of the countries where there's a great deal of conflict, and when women are also affected by gender-based violence and sexual violence in particular, we need to look at the reform, of access to justice. We find a lot of these women don't have access to report because of the authority of certain insurgents, and authority of maybe dominant male figures. So it's really important to look at how we can strengthen the reporting mechanisms. We need to be making more innovative ways to actually look at how we support them in their reporting. But also, concerningly as well, certain countries are well-intentioned and they're troop contributing countries as well. And therein lies the problem as well, where they also contribute to this whole issue of sexual violence and abuse of women as well. So, and I believe that they need to be held more accountable for the violence that they incur in their line of duty. Thank you, Laura-Jane. Thank you, esteemed panelists. It's really been a pleasure to be on this panel with you. Thank you. And thank you, SecurityWomen, for organizing this event. Really well done. Thank you.
No, thank you very much to all our panelists who have joined. I would like to then officially close off the Q&A and bring the session to a close. We're running slightly over time, but if you will allow me to present a few reflections on behalf of SecurityWomen. We've heard from our experts that there are existing innovative approaches to tackling the absence of women in peacekeeping, and to really ensure for the future that we will have the greater inclusion of gender, and specifically tackling those barriers to gender inclusion. I'd really like to highlight that we have raised the importance of going beyond the numbers and really locating the humanity in data-driven solutions. And adjacent to that is that inclusivity is also of paramount importance, that we not only focus on women, but children, as well as the inclusivity of really getting men on board to tackling those the patriarchal cultural norms which exist, and that to ensure that this is also achieved through partnerships, through building partnerships between the global north and global south, but also building south-south partnerships, and that is where we're really going to tackle key issues such as the lack of political will to bring about change, which was reflected in many of the conversations today. So I really want to thank everyone for a thoroughly engaging session, and close off our event. We thank all of our experts as well as our partners, and we also thank Brigadier General Musonda for his presence and his opening remarks. It was really a privilege to have you here today. Thank you, everyone, and please enjoy the rest of the summit for the future. I know some of you have events to get to, so yes, please get going. And thank you so much. Please follow us on our socials as well. We've been really enjoyed today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank
Goodbye.
you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.